Well, welcome everyone. My name is Peter Winter Lee. I am the Executive Director of the Susquehanna Folk Music Society. We are your grassroots home for traditional music, dance, and art in South Central Pennsylvania. For more information about what the Susquehanna Folk Music Society does and our upcoming events, please check out our website at sfmsfolk.org. We are also the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts Folk Partner for Region 8, and we represent Dauphin, Lebanon, and Cumberland counties. Funders for tonight's program include the Pennsylvania Council of the Arts on the Arts and the National Endowment on the Arts. We are so excited that so many of you could join us, not just from Pennsylvania, for tonight's presentation webinar on writing an apprenticeship grant. A couple things, housekeeping. Our host, Amy Skillman, will be pausing throughout the night for questions. We have a lot of ground to cover, but obviously it is very intimidating to write a grant. And so we want everyone to walk away from this evening feeling like they have had their questions answered. Obviously, something will undoubtedly come to you after the presentation ends. So feel free to contact Amy or myself, and we will make sure that your questions are answered afterwards as well. But if you have a question, we just ask that you hold on to that. Amy will be kind of organically breaking for questions. You can ask it then. If you're really afraid you're going to forget it, throw it in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat. And when we have those question breaks, I'll be kind of looking for any questions that happen. So without further ado, it is my great honor to welcome tonight's host. For over 30 years, Amy Skillman was Pennsylvania's state folklorist, managing the statewide folk arts infrastructure program for the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts and overseeing fieldwork around the state. Now living in Maryland, Amy is a part-time professor at Goucher College, where she is the academic director for the master's program in cultural sustainability. Someone just came in.
I got it.
It's pleased to be doing field work again in South Central Pennsylvania, her former backyard. I also want to recognize that Amy Skillman was just elected this year as the new president of the American Folklore Society. So we are deeply honored to have her as our folklorist at Susquehanna Folk Music Society. So give a very warm round of applause to Amy Skillman.
Nice, Swami. I like those clapping hands. Thank you. Okay, good. Thank you so much, Peter. So I am going to start by sharing my screen, which means going to here and hitting. I have two share screens up. Okay, share screen.
I believe we lost Amy momentarily. Yes, that is what appears that happens. One of the hangups of the webinar experience, but she will be back on soon. So thank you for everyone's patience.
Do you want to tell us jokes while we wait, or?
I feel like none of my joke, I don't think by Tuesday I'm ready for jokes. Anyone else can share a joke that they feel is appropriate for a grant writing webinar. Any folk arts related jokes?
They like you to play the guitar, Peter.
I feel like by the time I go get my guitar, Amy so I'm actually trying to maintain my composure because I poured coffee all over my desk as I was introducing Amy. I wouldn't have guessed that because I'm a professional. I'm going to quickly just check in with Amy. I'm going to turn myself off and mute just to make sure her internet connection is okay. So everyone entertain yourself. Alexandra, if that joke comes to you, feel free.
I only know children's jokes, guys. They wouldn't be good for you, so I'm just going to hold on to those.
The childlike wonder. I'd hear some.
Okay,
Don't
great.
pressure
Okay, what do you call a bear with no teeth?
I don't know.
A gummy bear.
It's pretty good.
Thanks.
Nice.
I'm just gonna stop there.
All right, that was a great way to start a workshop, right? So I had everything. I'm so sorry. So now I have to go back and get everything opened up again. I apologize. I have no idea what happened. I just suddenly disappeared. I mean, everything just got disconnected. That was so weird. Okay, so let's start this again. Did you all talk about me while I was gone?
Alexandra told some great jokes.
Oh, excellent. Okay, now let's try this again and see if it works. Share screen. All right, are you able to see this PowerPoint?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, excellent, great. Okay, so our agenda for today, first I want to spend about 10 minutes just reviewing what constitutes folk and traditional arts, particularly from the perspective of the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts, since that is in fact who sponsors these grants. Actually, first I want to stop and just really quickly point out Mary Kate Springley and Mary Grace Autumn Lee, who have joined us. And I don't know if Aaron is here yet, but they are going to be, they both are current apprentices in this year's round of apprenticeship grants. And so they're going to be kind of contributing some thoughts and experiences as we go along. So first we're going to talk about what constitutes the folk and traditional arts. Then we'll dig into the guidelines themselves and review the guidelines, and if we have time, maybe even look at the actual application form so you can get a sense of what it is that you're getting yourselves into if you're interested in that. And then we'll get I have posed a few questions to our current recipients of the apprenticeship grants. We'll have an opportunity for them to share some of their experiences, and then we'll have time for questions at the end. 10 minutes, 30 minutes on the review, 10 minutes response from recipients, and maybe 20 minutes for questions. So hopefully that's going to frame our workshop tonight. So before we begin, I would love it if you would just really quickly share with me, just go around really quickly and say who you are and what your interest is in this workshop. So John, I'm going to start with you since you're at the top of my screen.
Yeah. Hey, folks, my name is John Engel. I am the folk life or folk and traditional arts partnership equivalent here in Allegheny County. I work at Rivers of Steel, and I'm honestly just here to spy on Amy and steal her industry secrets. Especially
getting cut off at the beginning of a workshop, right? Thanks, John. Oh, Becky, how about you? You just popped up on my screen.
Hi, everybody. I'm Becky Catalane. I'm the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Rural Arts Alliance, and we are one of two brand new partners with the PCA in the Folk and Traditional Arts Program. So we have just 2 weeks ago hired a consultant to work with us. Her name is Lindsay, and I think she will be popping in here at some point for this webinar. We are hoping to have some applicants for the apprenticeship program this year. So I wanted to join the webinar just to learn as much as I can. And we're so excited about being a part of this program. We are just sharing, Lindsay and I are sharing ideas like crazy, and looking forward to being a part of this going forward.
Great, great, thanks. Alexandra, how about you? What brings you to this workshop?
Hi, I'm Alexandra. I am currently a part of a program that's dedicated to keeping Appalachian craft alive, and I'm a woodworker, and I'm going back to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania after this apprenticeship is over that I'm in right now, and kind of just curious about how people are funding their community efforts and keeping art alive, and just wanted to tap into this as a resource and see where it leads. So
Awesome, great. Daniel Stern, why don't you introduce yourself real quickly?
Yes, hi, my name is Dan, and I am a member of a gospel group along with Tom Cook, who's I think also in this meeting, called the Spiritual Messengers. And thank you, Amy, for the invite, and also for introducing us to the entire grant program, which we took advantage of. And filed an application for a grant successfully. So we're here to, I'm here to learn, make sure if we do this again that we continue with success, and make sure we really understand the process. It's been very helpful.
Great. And Tom, I think that's you next, right? Are you there, Tom Cook? iPhone, you're muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah,
Hey.
my name's Tom Cook. Hello. I'm a member of 3 roots musical groups, one of whom is the Spiritual Messengers, who are a recipient of a grant, I guess 2 years ago now, which was very successful. We had a very successful time having the tradition of ministering passed down to a younger member of the group. And I'm noticing in all the gigs I play, the average age of the audience is over 70. So I'm just wondering how we can bring roots music to a new and younger audience. And I'm here to try and say as little as possible and listen as much as possible.
Great. All right. Swami Nathan, how about you?
Yeah, I go by Swami.
Swami, okay.
Sure. My son, Rishi, is in middle school. He goes to the Eagle View. He's an aspiring musician. He's learning the Indian classical Carnatic music. He also plays flute, and then he's also learning piano. Despite my best efforts, he's turning out to be a classical musician. So I'm here to see how I can take advantage of it. He's been learning for the last 3 years. He has won several competitions, so he doesn't have any stage fear. He's doing great. So I just want to see how I can help him along.
Oh, good. So, that's great. And Camille, I see you've logged in.
Hi, yes, my name is Camille D'Antone. I am the acting folk and traditional arts coordinator at the Everhart Museum of Natural History, Science, and Art in Region 4, or Scranton, Pennsylvania. I'm also here to learn and get a little bit more insight on what it is that I can do to better my institution's folk and traditional arts program. I also have had a few artists who have reached out to me about potentially applying for the grant. So I'd like to get a little bit more insight so I can be better for them.
Okay, great.
I didn't catch your name. What was your name?
Oh, my name is Camille D'Antone.
Thank you.
Grace, quick introduction.
My name is Grace, and I am a musician from Harrisburg. I play the hammer dulcimer and play a lot of Irish music. So I'm currently working on my apprenticeship right now. It's been awesome. And I'm here just to kind of share some of my thoughts on it, and also just to learn more in case I reapply. So, always want to learn some new things about it. So yeah.
Great. Thank you. And Mary Kate, can you jump in? Yep.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mary Kate. I'm Grace's sister, and I also was awarded a grant to study traditional Irish harp, which has been so amazing. So I'm here to, hopefully pass on some things that I've learned, and then also just kind of keep my knowledge about the grant and the application process current too.
Great.
Did you write Moonflowers?
Yes, I did.
Fabulous.
Oh, so much. I love the way you guys play it.
Okay, we've got some friendships here, huh? Some other acquaintances. That's good. The music world intersects. Okay, great. Well, I just wanted to get a lay of the land real quickly before we move forward. So this definition that you see on the screen right now is the definition that the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts uses to define folk and traditional arts. And so I thought it would be an important place to start so that we could all be thinking about how do we fit into this definition. So artistic traditions, characteristic of specific ethnic, religious, linguistic, occupational, or regional groups. That's pretty broad. These arts are shaped and shared within families, neighborhoods, and communities. They're passed down from one generation to the other and learned through ongoing participation in community-based activities, observation, practice, apprenticeships, rather than through classes, books, or other means of more institutional kind of instruction. So in some ways, I like to think of these as arts with a lineage, that there's a heritage, that there's a family that in which these arts are practiced. Another way I like to think about this is as traditional arts as kind of the taproot of community. In other words, that significant root that nourishes and embodies the cultural, the values, the heritage, the history, the identity, the well-being, the aesthetics of a community. The folk and traditional arts, as you've heard, are this is expressive culture, how we express ourselves, sort of the heart and soul, I think, of how we express our belonging, our sense of belonging as part of a community. And I love this photograph because I think it says it really nicely. It's a colo dance embracing and surrounding newlyweds at a Serbian wedding. So we've got music interacting with song, interacting with dance, interacting with belief and value. And I think that kind of, in many ways, gets at the heart of what the folk and traditional arts are. So let me just really quickly run through, a set of slides that are examples of apprenticeships of master artists in particular that have been funded. Here's the Spiritual Messengers, gospel music that Dan and Tom are part of. But so these images are just images that are artists that have in fact received apprenticeships in the past. And so they are examples that are drawn from both apprenticeship grants, fellowship grants, and other opportunities in the state. And they primarily feature the master in these apprenticeships. But as I move through them, I think you'll notice an incredible range of art forms that they comprise, including domestic arts like basket making, lace making is in here, dressmaking, spiritual arts like the one we just saw of the iconography, music. This is traditional Bosnian music from a refugee community up in Erie. There's rural arts as well as urban arts. Here's some painting in the Chinese tradition. And here's Irish music. And even, I think well, urban arts, but I love this. I love that we funded an apprenticeship in graffiti, you know, the opportunity for youth to move beyond tags, to really embrace their art as an urban expression of life and experience. So, you know, so we have dance traditions. We have, this is Tibetan sand carving, or I'm sorry, sand painting. Here's the lace making I mentioned earlier. And this is a very newly arrived refugee community from Sudan, a Choli dance. You know, contrast that with Native American Eastern Woodlands beadwork, and we really have a full range of places where these artistic traditions show up. This is West African dance in the African community in Pittsburgh, John, in your neck of the woods. Wood carving, this is Milton Jews from Philadelphia doing traditional story stick carving. Rachita Nambiar Swami, you might know Rachita. She's currently on the board of Susquehanna Folk, but several years ago received an apprenticeship grant in Bharatanatyam dance, and works with folks in the area. I love this dry laid stone walls. This is a very old rural art form of creating fencing out of stones. And Ken Ely and his apprentice have kind of brought it back in the northern Pennsylvania area, making really beautiful structures. And then we have Matt Smith, who builds conga drums for the music industry. So, you know, there's this interesting kind of, I mean, there's an important intersection in the folk and traditional arts. These arts don't stand alone. I think the conga drum is a good example where the musician needs the drum, the dancers need the drum, you know, it's all interwoven. These are very deeply embedded art forms in the core values and experiences of their communities. And the artists themselves are really committed to sustaining these artistic traditions for future generations. And that's a really important thing to know about these apprenticeships, because these grants actually fund the master artist to work with a Pennsylvania apprentice in order to nurture and keep these traditions going in Pennsylvania. So it's really all about nurturing artistic tradition in Pennsylvania. So, are there any questions before I move on, specifically about understanding what the folk and traditional arts are? Does this make sense to all of you? Is there an example you want to ask about? Does it work? Do you have any questions at this moment? None? So it's all perfectly clear, huh? That's great. Okay. So then just real quickly, what are apprenticeships? So this is the grant program that we're specifically talking about tonight. These are grants that are, so the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts has actually been funding apprenticeships since 1983. They began in 1983 with a year that focused just on craft traditions, and then expanded it to include performance traditions, and they've been funding them ever since. Most states in the US actually have some kind of similar program. It was a brainchild of the National Endowment for the Arts all those years ago. Each state is a little bit different in its format and its resources, you know, and how much they can fund and where they focus those monies based on the needs and the resources in that state. I think Pennsylvania has one of the higher grant amounts at $4,000, as much as $4,000, I should say, that supports a master artist to work with a qualified apprentice over the course of a year to pass on the skills, as well as the cultural knowledge and that historical context of the art. And these terms, I think, are really important, and we'll tease them out a little bit as we move along. What is a master artist? What is a qualified apprentice? and how can you pull in and distinguish both the skills and the technique, as well as the cultural knowledge, cultural understanding, and the heritage and history of the art form. So the Arts Council funds about 20 apprenticeships every year. That varies, depending on what kind of applications come in. They're from all over the state. And the applications are due April 17th this year. They will be reviewed in late June by a panel that gets pulled together by Dana Payne, who is the director of the program at the Arts Council. And that panel will be comprised of both folk art scholars, folklorists and folk art scholars, and consultants, as well as artists that have maybe been in the program in the past and have a good perspective on what works as a feasible apprenticeship. So that panel meets in June and makes a decision. They submit their decision, or not their, they submit their recommendations to the council. And then the council, which is the governing body of the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts, they meet in July and review the recommendations and approve or deny them. And usually they're approved. It's pretty rare that a recommendation that comes from the panel to council gets denied once the peer review panel has had their their perspective on it. But it does happen occasionally, so it has to get the imprimatur of that imprimatur, whatever that word is, of the council. So that happens in July, and then the letters go out, and the grant can begin as early as September 1, and it runs through August 31st. Some people prefer to wait and start in January. That's not a problem. Sometimes it takes that long for the check to come. So some people wait till January specifically because they're going to wait until the check comes. But you'll get a contract earlier. You get that contract in the fall. And then it just, it's state government. So it takes a little while for checks to get processed. But a check comes at the beginning of the apprenticeship. And then you use that money to move forward with the work. The check usually goes to the apprentice, who then, or to the master, unless the master is out of the country or out of state, in which case the check goes to the apprentice. Grace, can you confirm that for me? Because you worked with,
yeah,
okay.
That's how it works.
Yeah. So, and a pair, an apprentice and a master, can apply for up to 4 times to work together in the over the course of 4 years or 8 years or whatever. You can apply to work together 4 times. There have also been masters who have applied to work with different apprentices in subsequent years. That doesn't count. And there have been apprentices who have applied to work with a different master. For instance, Vera Nakonechny, who was the very first slide of the embroidery at the beginning. She has had multiple apprenticeships over the years, developing different aspects of Ukrainian traditional dress. So 1 year it was embroidery, maybe 2 years it was embroidery. Another time it was leatherworking. Another time it was weaving to weave the belts. Another time it was the headdresses. So she's been able to build a whole repertoire of skill around the traditional dress of Ukrainian communities. So let's move on now to the guidelines, unless anybody has a quick question at this point.
Amy, I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Can you apply to do the same thing a second time or a third time with the same master and apprentice, just develop the same issue farther?
Yeah, that's a good question. You absolutely can. And in fact, if you do, The guidelines specifically encourage you to identify what you're going to do differently or how you're building, because the truth is, for those of you, I mean, all of you that are artists, you know that you don't learn an art form in 1 year, right? You might spend 1 year working on a particular aspect of a musical tradition, right? But we all know that you don't become a master in a year. So it's understood that you may very well come back to work together again in a second year and a third year. If you do that, you just want to make sure that you can clearly articulate what you're developing again as you move into a second year or a third year.
Okay.
That's
Thank
a
you.
really good question.
I
Any
think it
other
might even
questions?
take more than a year.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, really, in traditional guild language or guild, scenarios, an apprenticeship could be 8 years, right? For somebody to become really good at a particular craft like blacksmithing or, weaving or whatever. If you wanted to do an official apprenticeship, it could take 8 years. So we recognize that and welcome the opportunity for people to come back and apply a second or third time. And I think you just have to be really smart about ensuring that the panel understands what how you're building on last year's work. So yeah, be really clear about that. Don't try to hide the fact that you're coming, but it's your second year. Actually embrace it and explain why.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other quick questions before we move on to the actual guidelines? Okay, so the guidelines themselves, I think I have to stop sharing here for a second. The guidelines themselves are on the Pennsylvania Council website, and I think Peter's going to put that link in the chat so that you all can either have it for the future or you can follow along. And now I'm going to come back to sharing. So are you able to all see this now?
Yes.
All right, great, thank you. So this is the homepage of the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts. And if you can click here on apply for a grant. There are also, you can see it's tracking what I visited in the last several days. But I'm going to click on apply for a grant because that's what you would do. And this page shows you you can apply as an organization, but we're going to scroll down to individuals and we're going to click on the apprenticeship grant right here. And on this page, are you following me? Are you tracking?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this page has two elements on it. One is the folk arts apprentice or the partnership. You heard, those of you that are artists heard a couple people talking about the fact that they are a new partner or an existing partner. So this is a network of organizations around the state that are dedicated to documenting, presenting, and promoting folk and traditional arts in Pennsylvania. These are organizations that are working with the Arts Council to kind of be their feet on the ground, to identify artists in the region and to help those artists gain access to what the Arts Council offers, such as these grants. So this workshop is partly our role as Susquehanna Folk Music Society's role as a local partner to introduce you all to these grant programs. And that's one of the responsibilities of the partnerships. If you click on, I'm going to scroll down, if you click on this regional map, this shows you all of the regions around the state. You can see that we're region 8 right here with Dauphin, Lebanon, and Cumberland counties. But John is out here in Allegheny County. I think, let's see, Becky, are you in 13? And Camille, you're up in, are you 4? I think Camille is 4.
Yep.
Yeah, so these are all the different, so if you're interested in, if you're not from our region, you can scroll down here and find a link to the person who is the folk arts partner in your region. Now, not all the regions have folk arts partners. We're moving that way. So if you know an organization in a region that doesn't have a folk arts partner that might be interested in becoming a folk arts partner, be sure to let us know that as well. Also, there's another grant program. You can see it on here. It's called the PPA, Pennsylvania Partners in the Arts. They are local organizations that give out smaller grants. So if you are an organization, I think, Alexandra, you might be interested in this if you're working for an organization right now. If you're an organization that is interested in a project grant, then that might be a category to look at. And we can talk about that later if there's time, or you and I can set up a time to talk later. But you can find the PPA partner in your region as well. So that's the partnership that the Arts Council has set up. So now if you scroll down beyond that, you'd come to apprenticeships. Here's their description of what the apprenticeships are. And here's where you can find PDF versions of the guidelines and the application. So I'm going to open the guidelines. And I'm going to, should I make that bigger? Can you see that? Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good. It's better for me, that's for sure. And I keep looking this way because I actually have 2 screens. And so that's why I'm looking over here, because that's where I have this coming up. But anyway, so these are the actual guidelines for this coming year. And you can see there, this is their definition that we've already explored. This is a description of what constitutes an apprenticeship. And then here's the eligibility requirements. And so this is where I really want to start talking about the apprenticeships in particular. It's really important that the master and the apprentice apply together. It's always a much stronger application if the pair works together to develop and design their work plan in particular. And I can tell you that I've seen applications coming in where it's really clear they haven't worked together. And a panel seeing that is going to think they're not going to be convinced that the apprenticeship is going to be successful, because it's not real clear that the two have already really thought this through. So it's really important, that the apprentice, the master and the apprentice kind of work together to design what it is that they're going to do. And at this point, I'd like to invite Mary Kate. I think you have some experience and some thoughts about this. How did you find the master artist that you wanted to work with, and what was that process like to work with her on developing the plan?
Well, I think part of it is interesting because when you apply for the grant, you're supposed to have some knowledge in the art form that you're applying for. So I kind of already had an idea of who some of the current masters in the field of Irish harp were. So she was definitely on the top of my dream list for, masters I would like to work with. So, the difficult thing was definitely getting in touch, initially was hard. So I would definitely say and 2 things I would say is go out there and definitely aim high, because, you never know if the person you'd love to study for will say yes. They might say no, but then you can just kind of go down your list of people. But then also just as with all of this application process, give it a lot of time, because you just don't know what things will come your way. And then you have plenty of time for rewrites and stuff. But once I got in touch
Mhm.
with, I'm studying with Grania Hambley, who lives in Ireland. She was really receptive to working on the grant. And we did exchange a lot of like the work plan and like text information quite a lot. So she would kind of be like, well, you know, I know, like, I think I initially like drafted the work plan, and then she said, you know, well, you know, I think you're trying to cover too much material, or like, what if we structured it this way? So by the end of it, it was kind of like a work plan, and then our visions were things that we had like remotely discussed together.
Great. Yeah. And I think you're wise to suggest giving it a lot of time, because that back and forth, that's an important kind of give and take, right? To have the time to really develop the idea and to get the feedback that says, whoa, this is too ambitious. Let's pare this back. And, the stuff that you left off could be the stuff of next year's application, right? So,
and also it's nice to have that extra time too, because like, virtually we had like no relationship other than like, I knew her work very well, but she didn't know me at all. So it was nice kind of just building, that relationship, even though it was just by email at first, of like, this is who I am, like, here are some of like examples of my playing. So again, by the time we'd like applied together, it did kind of feel like, we had sort of the start of a master apprenticeship partnership together.
yeah. No, that's great. And, one of the questions that the master has to address in the application is, why do you want to work with this apprentice? So, so being able to answer that in a effective way, in a thoughtful way, is really important. So, if the master doesn't really know the apprentice very well at all, then clearly they're not going to be able to address that, and the panel's going to be able to tell.
Oh, it's true.
So,
it's definitely like, yeah, it's something you can't fake. Or like, if you
Yeah.
like tried to sort of just like write something generic, it definitely reads through.
yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, Grace, did you want to add anything to that? Was that your daughter taking a picture of her aunt being on the screen? That was cute.
Probably.
I didn't know. Yeah. Oh, there you are.
Oh, yeah. So Mary Kate did a great job explaining it. And I would just say to emphasize, like, you are starting like with a foundation. Like, it can be very intimidating. I'm like, where do we begin? How much do we do? And just remember, like, you've like done your craft before. So just think like, what's a good starting base? And then the grant, its job is just to expound on that. Say like, here's my foundation. How can I make it better? How can I grow? So just remember when you're writing it, like, you're not just like have like nowhere to begin. It's like start with that foundation and build from that, just so you know where to go.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And as I recall, I think, Grace, in your apprenticeship, I think you and I talked a little bit and found some pretty cool historical stuff about the dulcimer in Irish music, which was fun because it was an added layer that strengthened your application, I think, in some ways. So
It did. Yeah, it was really nice. So yeah, if you're writing a grant, just like take the time to do the research. I was picked an instrument that like I've been playing it for 13 years now, and this grant gave me the opportunity to be like, where did it start? What are its origins and how does it play in Irish music? So that was really, really cool and added a layer to it, and just showing that like there's still so much more that, I can learn. And
yeah, that's great. And I think what that information did was to deepen the kind of cultural context of the art form, and showed a kind of lineage, to go back to the idea of folk arts as arts with a lineage. It showed that lineage.
yeah, absolutely. And it was a cool thing because like the dulcimer has like a very complicated relationship with Ireland. Like, it's not typically considered a traditional instrument, but it has history and dates back to, really early like 1800s and everything. So it was cool seeing like it's been there before, but we're kind of like bringing it back and showing like, oh, it's in the tradition, but like it just needs to, get bigger. Like we've seen it before, but had some trouble staying in the tradition.
Yeah, that's great. At the other end of the spectrum from, I think, what Mary Kate was talking about, which was finding a master that was kind of her dream master to work with, the spiritual messengers, and I'm not trying to put Tom or Dan on the spot, but the apprenticeship that they did 2 years ago was actually between a father and a son, passing on a really important artistic piece of the gospel tradition that they've grown up in and that they can, have performed for 35, 40 years. So I don't know if you guys want to add anything about that, but that, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you. I was just thinking out loud here that it was, not only was it true, it's not like we went looking for a traditional art to get funding for. It's that this tradition already existed.
Mm-hmm.
And even though the father and son were in the same band and in the same tradition, the father knew how to do it and the son didn't. And so it was the right time for this, and it really worked. We actually saw the process by which father and son sat down together and really worked on this. And it was just as a tremendous outcome that the grant was successful in facilitating the preservation of an organic art form that only exists inside the Black church.
Yeah.
So it was pretty exciting to watch because it was real.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah. So so thank you for all of your thoughts there. So working with identifying a master artist or an apprentice that makes sense, that where there's synergy, where there's a cultural connection of some kind, and a deep appreciation, a shared appreciation for the art form, I think is really important. These grants focus very much on living artistic traditions. So they don't fund things like staged productions or historical art forms, like maybe broom making or soap making or things like that are done primarily in a kind of historic home kind of context or historic museum context. These should be art forms that are very much a living part of a community, and in that sense, evolving and changing with the experiences of the community. So, take a look here at the things that they don't fund: reproductions of historical objects, ongoing classes, where it's really a classroom situation. It's pretty rare for there to be an apprenticeship with more than one or maybe two apprentices, because this is really about passing on that cultural knowledge to an individual that might become a master at some point. So ongoing classes are not what we're looking for, or the production or marketing of crafts that are not part of a living heritage. So I think those are some important things to think about. The master artist here, must be somebody that can demonstrate excellence within that artistic tradition. So, that has a long-standing participation with the art form, that is viewed by people in the community as really the master of that work, or a very highly skilled practitioner of that art form, be held in high regard by their community for the work that they do, and be able to pass it on, be willing and interested to pass it on. One of the differences, I think, between sort of studio learned arts and traditional arts is that in the traditional arts, the master artists are eager to have somebody know how they do what they do. And studio arts, there's kind of much more sort of trade secrets, right? About about their art form. So I think that's one of the interesting distinctions. So with the apprentice, again, they must, be able to, John, did you come on because you had a question? No? Okay. I just saw you come on screen. So the master, by the way, can be from Pennsylvania. Preference is given to a master in Pennsylvania because we want to honor our local artists. But an apprentice has to be from Pennsylvania. And they, as you've seen, they might be working with somebody from another country. And Swami, I think there have been quite a few apprenticeship grants in Asian Indian art forms where the apprentice is local and they actually have spent 2 months in India studying with a guru in India. So that's a definite possibility if you can't find somebody in Pennsylvania to teach the art form that, that's the subject of the apprenticeship. So the apprentice should be 18 years of age. That's important. And demonstrate a commitment to learning and maintaining the art form. And I think, a really important part is that the apprentice should be somebody that is also committed to passing it on, to sharing this art form, maybe to becoming a teacher eventually. I'll give you an example of I was on a grant panel in New Jersey one time and there were 2 apprenticeships that came in the same year that were DJing, disc jockeying, DJing in an urban community, right, among urban youth. And it was so interesting because in one case, the apprentice talked about the reason why they wanted to learn this is because they wanted to make this their living. They wanted to be able to earn their living from this. They wanted to become a star. They wanted to become famous as a disc jockey, a DJ. And the other one said they wanted to learn it because they wanted to understand the nuances so they could teach it to the next generation and help the next generation embrace this art form as a way of self-expression. So given those 2 scenarios, which do you think was funded?
The one that is passed to the next generation.
Right. Yeah. So the second one, the one where the apprentice was really committed to ensuring that the art form gets continued and wanted to share it. So,
quick question.
Yeah.
I think my son is only 13 years old. He's in the middle school, so he's not eligible, right? He has to be 18, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There have been cases that have been made, and so I wouldn't rule it out entirely, but I would say let's connect with Dana Payne and find out how strict that rule is. If the rule is there because as the apprentice, they're the one that's going to be receiving funding, then it definitely has to be somebody that's at least 18. If the master is in Pennsylvania and the money is going to the master, there might be wiggle room. I'm not sure. I do know of past apprenticeships that have worked with younger apprentices, so I just don't know how strict they are right now with that rule. But yeah, so, okay, so let's see. There's the residency requirement. Here's the timeline. I think we've already talked about the timeline. So here's the criteria. These are really important to keep in mind as you're writing your apprenticeship application. Each of these is worth 25 points, and I'll tell you a little bit about how they're assessed. So the first is the master artist. Is their cultural background relevant to the art form that's being taught? What is their training? How are they known? What's their knowledge? What's their technical ability? Are they actually really good at what they're teaching? And how well are they recognized in the community? So this is demonstrated through their artist statement. So the things that the way they answer the questions, but it's also demonstrated through work samples. And we'll talk about work samples in a minute, but just make a note that your work samples are really critical. The quality of your work samples can make all the difference in the world. The quality of your work sample can promote a weaker narrative into the top rating, or the lack of quality in your work sample can actually diminish a well-written narrative to a lower score because we really couldn't tell how good the artist was. So we'll talk about that in a minute, but the work samples and the artist statement are the places where where the master artist will demonstrate their eligibility and the quality of their work. The apprentice, again, their cultural background. We're generally looking for a master and apprentice who share a cultural background. That cultural background, as we saw in the beginning, it could be an ethnic cultural background. It could be a regional geographic cultural background. It could be an occupational cultural background, like duck decoy carving or basket making. But they should share that background in some way. And so I think that's important. The apprentice should also have some basic competency in the art form. So the apprentice should not be a beginner. They should be somebody that, if they don't have competency in that particular art form, at least have artistic competency. So, although primarily I would say it would be preferable to have competency in that specific art form, but I have seen apprentices who were excellent needle workers, really high quality needle workers who wanted to do a weaving apprenticeship with a master artist in their same tradition. And they were basically expanding their textile awareness in that tradition. So that would be an example. But I think for the most part, the apprentice should have some competency within that art form. And as I've said earlier, have a commitment to maintaining that art form and sharing it, passing it on. The quality of the work plan is the third criteria. This is, again, worth 25 points. So, and as Mary Kate alluded to, a work plan that's not too ambitious, a work plan that's realistic, a work plan that makes sense. So for instance, I showed you one picture of Liesl Harker, who, was doing an apprenticeship in the flute music of Galway. Very focused, very intentional kind of work. And if her work plan had included flute music from other parts of Ireland, it wouldn't have made sense. She really focused on the flute music of Galway. So it's important that the work plan be very reflective of the artistic tradition that you want to do, and be reasonable, be practical, and that there's a solid learning approach. Your work plan, try to be as detailed as possible. I've seen work plans that simply say, in January, we're going to work on this tune. In February, we're going to work on this tune. In March, we're going to work on this tune. April, we're going to work on this tune. And that didn't fly compared to an apprenticeship that says, in January, we're going to develop these particular musical structures within the tune. And we're going to research the history of the tune, and we're going to transcribe it from, I'm getting really involved here, but a much more detailed work plan that demonstrates that you've really thought it through and that you really know how you're going to pull this off. And then finally, the prospective impact. So this is about sustainability. How are you as the apprentice? If you're the apprentice, and or the master, but in Pennsylvania, what are your goals for sustaining this art form? For, what kind of impact do you want to have in the community? So, and or on you as an artist, what kind of impact do you want this to have on you as an artist? So any questions at this point about any of that?
Amy, if I could ask one.
Yeah, sure.
So in our specific organization, not so much my department, but my colleagues work a lot with occupational traditions of metalworking and blacksmithing and things like that. Knowing that the apprentice and the master have to share a cultural background, do you think that the council would accept, oh, we've both worked in metalworking, either industrially or just artistically, personally, as a shared background?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. And actually, is Aaron here? I don't know if Aaron joined us. I can't see who all is here, but
I don't believe Aaron ever showed up.
Okay. Well, Aaron's is a really interesting apprenticeship that she has going. Aaron is a transnational adoptee from Korea, adopted by Pennsylvania German family. And she grew up in Pennsylvania with, all the sensibilities of that Pennsylvania German background, including a grandfather who was a serious woodworker. And she ended up being able to find a local woodworker in Carlisle to help her. She had been doing wood burning, that I think is what her grandfather did, but she was really interested in getting into carving. And so in that case, she found a wood carver, Jim Heiser, who lives in Carlisle, and the two of them got together and talked about how they might be able to work together to help Aaron develop a carving style that might draw on the Korean masking tradition, which are handmade wooden masks from Korea, but also build in, the kind of figurative carving that is so common in central Pennsylvania. So she was able to make a really interesting case. And in that case, their shared background was growing up in central Pennsylvania and both being woodworkers, but in slightly different forms, but able to work together. So that's another good example, I think. So yeah.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm going to scroll down here and just talk a little bit about the work samples. On this page 3 of the guidelines, that you can see that there are some very detailed instructions for how to submit your work samples. This is really critical. And I will say that probably, as I said, the work samples can make or break your apprenticeship. I have been on panels where we've been given a video of a dance troupe, and we're supposed to figure out who in that dance troupe is the master artist that is the subject of this apprenticeship, and they haven't been identified in any of the material. So it's impossible to tell. So it's so sad because they're great dancers, but we can't tell who the master is. So it's really important in your work samples that you submit work samples that are clearly identified, that are, and if it's a video, tell them exactly where you want to start, because I'll tell you from personal experience, a panel is not going to listen to more than sometimes 45 seconds of a video or an audio piece, enough to hear that you're really good. That's what they want to hear. If they listen to more, it's because they're probably trying to figure out if you're really good. But what you don't want is to give them a video that starts at the beginning, but really the place where the master or the apprentice is showing off is at, timestamp 422. So tell them to fast forward to timestamp 422. And actually what they're asking people to do now is to edit that piece out and submit it as, a WAV file or an MP4 file or something like that, so that we start it right where you want us to. But be sure that you read all of this very carefully. I'm wondering, Grace or Mary Kate, if either of you have thoughts about what helped you develop your work samples? Like, what was this process like, and what helped you? What did you do?
I would say for work samples, luckily I had a couple of videos I could use that were like professionally filmed. I also just kind of like looked at videos of like my like friends who are musicians who do it full time, just to see like what are they uploading, what do they have that looks, very professional and shows that like they're also doing something in the field. And like you don't have to like hire anyone to be like filming videos of you, but just like make sure like the sound quality reflects who you are as an artist, and also just like think of the lighting in the video. I think a video I did was like something I did outdoors, which was nice, so I just had natural lighting. So just think about like those things. It doesn't have to be like super professional, but think about lighting and audio quality. So that's something I did too. I just like looked up videos that I see online, and then also just kind of yeah,
that's really good. And I would say don't be intimidated by the need for a professional video, right? As long as it's clear, as long as the panel can tell who's who in it, and that it's not in a really dark room with no lighting, as Grace pointed out, it can be done on your phone, right? I mean, you could just set up something and play on your phone. A good example, if you're doing performing arts, or if you're doing dance, some kind of dance or music tradition.
I would add too, like try to pick some like diverse things. So like I'm in a band, so I think one video was like, this is me playing with other people and out like in the community. One was just like a solo thing. I had done like a music video challenge a couple years ago, so I pulled like, here's just like a video of me playing at home. So that's a big thing too. So like if you have diverse videos, show like you with other people, one of yourself.
That's a really good recommendation. Show the diversity of your work. You really want to show yourself off, right? You want to put your best foot forward. And I would say, don't submit a kind of montage of a bunch of different things, short clips of that bounce all over, that are 3 seconds for each, because that doesn't give the panel a real sense of your capacity to play a song, right? So I've seen those where people have done, well, let's do a quick montage of, and it's more of a promo piece than it is a real artist example. So artist work sample. So I would say just be really thoughtful and careful about that. And let's see. And if you want feedback, now I'm happy to give you feedback on your application. I'm happy to help you brainstorm, some of what you're thinking about for your application. I think the rest down here, this tells you everything that goes in the packet. And so now I want to just quickly show you, because I want to get to more questions, although I think we're doing okay on time. I want to go back to the actual application. Can you all see this? I make it bigger. So this is the actual application form. You'll need to download this. I think you can fill it out online. Yep, it looks like you can fill it out online. And then you can add the supplemental materials that you need. You can see you first check off, is it your first year, second year, third year, or fourth year? And then general information. One thing you have to look up is your House district and your Senate district. And the reason for this is that the Arts Council actually sends letters to your legislators telling them that you've received an apprenticeship. And if you get an apprenticeship, I strongly encourage you to reach out to your legislators and say thank you, because they're the ones that actually give money, that allocate money to the Arts Council, right? So so you have to look them up if you don't already know them, and then just make sure that, you know, just make yourself a note, especially if you're going to do some kind of public programming. You'll want to make sure that you include them and invite them.
Is that your
So-
state or federal legislator, Amy?
Yeah, both
Both.
are here. Yeah. Now, federal is less, well, the Arts Council does get money from the NEA. And some of that money goes to regranting. I'm not sure exactly if the apprenticeship is regranted from the NEA or not, but that's one of the reasons it's here. So doesn't hurt to let them know. Okay, so master artist. So these are the 4 questions that the master artist should fill out. Describe the traditional art form you're teaching, where and how you learned it, and what role it plays in your everyday life. And then the second one is, so that's really about it. And I would strongly encourage you to, both of you, the artist and the master and the apprentice, to speak from your heart. Those are the most powerful applications, the ones that really speak from your heart. So in the second one, the second question here is about describing the cultural community. And, you know, this is one of those things that's really important too. How are you both part of how do you define the community where your art form is practiced, where your art form is enjoyed? Is it the community of, you know, lovers of Irish music in the Mid-Atlantic region, right? Which is a huge community. Or is it a community of blacksmiths and people who work in metal? Is it a community? Is it a religious community? Is it, you know, what is the community? How do you define it? So that's an important piece. Well, they're all important. I shouldn't say that's important. Then the third question is the relationship to the proposed apprentice. Have you worked together previously? Why do you, what does this apprentice need to learn? What do you as the master artist already know about the apprentice and see that they need to learn? That one is a particularly important question in years 2, 3, and 4, where, you know, you can talk about they've come this far and here's the next step. Here's the next thing they need to learn. And then number 4, if completed, what impact do you think as the master this apprentice will have on the community and the long-term impact? So those are the kinds of questions the master artist answers. The apprentice has pretty much those 4 questions. And then let's see, when and where did you learn? Describe how this is important to your cultural community. Keep in mind that, you know, here we're particularly interested in supporting the development of art of apprentices, the development of new masters, the development of new cultural leaders, new artistic leaders in the community. So think about that. And then your relationship to the master, why you want to learn this, you know, how this apprenticeship is going to allow you to move to new levels in your artistic goals, and then what you hope as the apprentice the long-term impact will be. Notice that the master and the apprentice both have to sign this document. If both signatures aren't on there, it disqualifies the application. So make sure that both of them are on there, including dates. And then, okay, the budget. So this is really what it's all about, right? It's a grant, it's about money. What are we going to do with the money? So you can see that they've got a pretty clear budget for you to work with, how you're going to identify how the money's going to be spent. And the one thing I'll say with the fee per hour, The Arts Council doesn't set that. Although the majority of apprenticeship funds should go to the master artist, the Arts Council doesn't tell you what that fee should be, because that's really between you and the master artist. I've seen everything from $15 an hour to $300 an hour in an apprenticeship application. I can tell you that a panel will say, look at $15 an hour and say, that's not respectful. They should get more money than that. It's often the master not wanting to get paid at all and just wanting to share their art form. I've known quilters and, you know, that.
Looks like we lost Amy. She was on a roll. She'll be back in a little bit.
I moved my tablet and it touched my keyboard and I thought I did this. I'm glad it wasn't me.
If you're able to knock the admin out of the Zoom call, I'd be very impressed.
I'm not that good.
A good moment if anyone needs to run and get a drink of water or something like that. We'll call it intermission. He's restarting and being updated.
But you just can't barge into a hospital and turn it upside down. I told you, Carrie's in danger. Carrie is fine. I just know she's resting quiet. I'd like to check that out for myself. You are a detective, not a doctor. Arrest is very important now. If you can calm down.
Oh no. Amy's computer is doing an automatic update. So I have to send her the link. She's going to get on my phone. I'll be right back, everyone. Grace, tell everyone if you could think of what was the one thing, you know, you felt like you learned going through the process, you know, like the one thing you wish you had known that you really learned about applying for this grant by doing it.
Ooh. I definitely emphasize making a very realistic plan too. I think it's very easy to get caught up like, whoa, a grant, I'm gonna go on this like super artistic journey this year and it's gonna be great. And I think you have to remember like life still goes on too. So look at like how busy am I right now and what can I like realistically fit in. So, you know, I think I did a pretty good job of that. So it's just remembering like, okay, like, you know, if work takes up this much time of my day, you know, how much can I invest each day in the grant? So I think that's an important thing is just really work with, you know, talk to Amy, talk to the master and just realistically say like, what, you know, can we put in, you know, because it's something, you know, you want to work on it each day and, you know, give it your, you know, 100%. So I think making sure you're making a very realistic plan. That's good. I think too, just really let yourself shine like writing the grant. Don't get too caught up in trying to make it like incredibly academic. Make sure it feels very personal. And I know in my grant, I shared a lot of stories. So make sure you do that. They are getting a lot of grants that they have to go through with like a fine tooth comb and everything. So I make sure it sounds very personal, but also very professional. So I think that's a big thing too.
Can I jump in here with one suggestion? I've worked with PCA grants for about 10 years. I was a PPA partner for a number of years. And one of the things that I have told every one of the applicants is give your grant application, after you write your narrative, give it to somebody that knows nothing about what you're doing and let them read it. And you will be astounded at the things that you forgot, were unclear about, you know, any number of things. And that has really helped people. They've come back and told me that they've learned a lot from doing that. So it seems a pretty common sense thing to do.
No, you're so right. You know, when I was learning to write a grant, someone told me about this. Oh, Amy's coming in. I'll share my word of wisdom for later. But I was just going to corroborate what you're saying. The things that you think are a given and make perfect sense are usually the things that you need to explain. The things that are like, oh, everyone understands that. It's like, no, make sure that, you know, every element, explain from the bottom up.
Yep. I've seen people leave out things like, when is this going to take place? Or who are the people that are going to do the work? Also making sure your math works. So if you're selling tickets for $10 a piece, you know, make sure that the number of tickets you're going to sell works out to be whatever that amount is. Just, you know, silly things like that, or things that from observing grant panels, the things that the panelists pick out immediately.
Yeah, I've definitely been on, I've served on the panel as an advisor for the apprenticeship grants before. And full disclosure, I obviously had to recuse myself when my sister's grant applications were being considered. But you know, we are encouraged to, you know, not necessarily like, you know, be dogmatic about the structure, you know, really just try to like see the spirit of the application. But if there are just like gaping holes in the things that are not, you know, if I can barely understand the skill that you're trying to learn, and you'd be surprised at how many of the applications are like that, where it's not clearly, you know, explained, that's when, you know, we're going to have problems.
So can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you,
Yes.
Amy.
Oh my God, I can't believe my computer suddenly decided it was time to do updates. And it says your PC will start several times. Your organization manages your update settings. So I have no choice but to let it update. And it's now at 89%. I'm so sorry. I had no idea that was going to happen. So I do apologize. It sounds like you all stepped in, which is great. We were talking about the budget. And I think what I was saying is that with the master artist fee, you know, $15 an hour is not enough, and $300 an hour is a little high, right? So I think you want to make sure that it's reasonable. And it sounds like you guys were also talking about if you're doing public programming, Becky was talking about that. If you're doing public programming, make sure that it's really clear what it is that you're going to do. You do not need to match this grant. This grant is a $4,000 grant outright, so there's no need to match it. So I heard Becky talking about, you know, $10 for a ticket. You don't need to do that in this case, but I think the spirit of what you were saying, Becky, was to make sure that and I totally agree with this, to make sure that the budget numbers are reflected in the narrative. So if you include $400 to do a public event, but you don't talk about a public event anywhere in the narrative, that just looks like you're adding $400 for the sake of adding $400, right? The same thing with documentation. If you're planning to document, say you want to do photography, or maybe you're going to record every session and you want, to use some money to buy a good recording device, if you add, $150 for documentation, but you don't talk about how you're gonna do that in the narrative, then that again looks like you're just adding that for the sake of adding it. I can't tell you how many apprenticeships come in at $4,000. Everybody asks for $4,000, which I think is hilarious. Somehow they make the budget go to the max. And that's fine, you can do that, but I think that a budget that looks like you've really thought through the costs, and that maybe it's $3,875 or whatever, but it's fine to ask for 4,000. But yeah, so what other questions did you have about the budget piece? Were there other questions that came up?
Amy, is it a problem if the majority is going to go to pay the master to do the work?
No, not at all. I've seen grants that have been $3,500 to the master and $500 for some travel or something, or $3,800 to the master and $200 for travel. Yeah, no, that's not a problem at all. In Pennsylvania, we specifically don't pay the apprentice because we're essentially we're giving the apprentice the funds to be able to work with the master. So that's what they're getting out of it. That's their benefit as the apprentice. I've been talking to the Arts Council about maybe changing that a little bit and adding a little bit of incentive for the apprentice, by giving them a little bit of money, but they haven't gone there yet. So we'll see. But yeah, I think that's, yeah, so I think the majority of the money should go to the master artist. I mean, that's really what this is about, is connecting you as the apprentice with a master artist who can really help develop your skills. So are there any other questions about the budget? Then, if yes, no.
Can you not see us, Amy?
No, I'm just on
Okay,
my
so yeah,
audio.
everyone is shaking their head. We're good. You've explained it very adequately.
Okay, great. Okay. So the last thing that I wanted to just go over quickly is the work plan itself. We've talked about this a little bit already, make sure that it's feasible for what you plan to learn. And as I said earlier, you can start it in September, you can start it in January. There have been some apprenticeships, and I mentioned a couple of Carnatic or Bharatanatyam ones, where the bulk of the apprenticeship takes place in over 3 months in the summer, or 2 months in the summer. You want to make sure that that your work plan is clearly an apprenticeship and not a series of classes, or not a 2-week intensive, band camp experience, right? You want to make sure that it's really an engaged opportunity over time to work with a master who's going to help develop your artistic skills, or work with an apprentice that you see real promise and you want to work with over a long period of time. So, I would say avoid a work plan that condenses the experience into a short period of time. Make sure that, as I said, that your budget reflects what you say in your work plan. And so, yeah, so I don't know, is Mary Kate still there? I think Grace talked a few minutes ago. Either one of you want to chime in on developing your work plan? One of you commented earlier about the kind of ambitiousness and how did you pare it down? And either of you have something you want to add?
Yeah, I talked a little about this earlier, but I would just emphasize too, just making it very personable so they know who you are. And just being very practical, really start with that foundation. What have you done over the years with studying, and how can we build it up to really make it a true grant. And I can't just emphasize more enough, just like talk to the master you want to work with, talk to Amy, and just kind of see like, does this sound like a good plan? I think those are the big things, and just the time goes fast before they're due. So just, start early and start writing out ideas, and talking to others is a big thing too.
Yeah, great. Well, good. So, are there other questions from those of you? Sorry, I was trying to log in, but now it's telling me they're going to do updates. All right. So,
Technology is our friend.
I know. Very embarrassing. I apologize. I'm curious.